Senator Scott, please proceed.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks for holding the hearing. Mr. Rector, in the last 2 years, how many people, first of all, I come from an immigration state. I've come from Florida, so we have a lot of, primarily Latin America, but some Eastern Europe, but a lot from Latin America. So, our economy is, over the last, especially 50 years, a lot of it's been developed based on legal immigration from Cuba, Venezuela, and then, of course, American citizens have come from places like Puerto Rico. So in the last 2 years, how many people have come into our country legally, and how many people have come in illegally?
Equal. I know illegally, it's been 5 million people. We know that by looking at the encounters that result in an admission to the country. It's absolutely unprecedented. And this discussion is a little distorted because we talk about needing STEM engineers and things, but they're not STEM engineers or PhDs with electronics engineering coming across the border here. All of that immigration historically is very, very low educated, and it is not going to produce technological change or anything. Many of these people have an 8th grade education, and what they actually do, in my perspective, is to push out the lowest skilled American workers, particularly minority workers, right out of the workforce, and there's a massive literature that indicates that.
So you think there's been about in the last 2 years, about 5 million legal
Yes.
and
No,
5 million illegal?
I believe so. I know the illegals. I haven't.
You don't know, does anybody know the legal number of people who have come here legally in the last 2 years?
In the last 2 years?
Yeah.
We've awarded about 2.1 million green cards.
For 2 years, so about.
For 2 years.
Yeah, okay, so 2.1 have come here legally and 5 million illegally. So if you come here legally, what benefits does the government give you versus if you come here illegally? Does anybody know? Mr. Rector?
Yeah, the legal immigrants after 5 years are eligible for the welfare system, 90 different means-tested programs. They also are eligible for Social Security and Medicare. But that's a little illusory because the welfare programs primarily have eligibility through children. Illegal immigrants have children, they get in the welfare state. So, and basically we're promising amnesty, which most of the members of Congress, or at least on the left side, want amnesty. That would give the illegals eligibility to absolutely everything.
But just, let's go back. So if you come here legally,
Yeah,
is there a cost to other taxpayers?
absolutely. Again, the simplest thing to
So
understand.
it's just on the legal?
Just on the legal,
What would be the average cost to an American citizen if somebody comes here legally?
It's a couple $10,000 a year, depending upon the education level. Again, the simplest thing to understand is if you bring in someone with a college education, they're going to pay more in taxes than they take out in benefits. If you bring in somebody with a 10th grade education, it's exactly the opposite. Over the course of a lifetime, they're going to take out about $3 of benefits for every dollar taxes they pay.
Okay. So if you come here legally, right now,
That's legal or illegal.
if you come here legally, 2.1 million people came here legally. Let's just take they come here. They come here legally. They get their green card. Do they cost us money?
Yes.
Are they productive citizens day one?
The welfare system is designed to support people who work, okay? So they, in fact, do work, but they also receive enormous amounts of benefits. That's the nature of the welfare state.
Do
So-
the people that come here illegally get more benefits?
No, they get slightly less, so they're actually slightly less expensive to the taxpayer. But the bottom line is a person with a 10th grade education, 11th grade education, we redistribute income to that person very strongly, whether they're born in Kentucky or whether they
So let me
come
ask you a
from
question.
abroad.
So what you see in the news is places like New York are saying that all these illegal immigrants have come up there, and now there's housing and hotels, and they're giving food vouchers and things like that. So a legal citizen doesn't get, if somebody comes here with a green card doesn't
Absolutely
get
not.
that.
New York City is a little extreme because they have a right to shelter there. But the bottom line is, again, I've studied the welfare system and what I call the broader transfer system for my entire career. If you have people that are less skilled, we support them. We don't require them to pay much in taxes. We give them lots of benefits from welfare, Social Security, education of the kids, all of which is free, all of which has to be paid for by the U.S. taxpayer. And when you bring in that type of individual through either illegal or legal immigration, it puts enormous fiscal pressures on the rest of the taxpayers.
Okay. So okay, so nobody knows the number, is if you came here legally, what it costs us versus if somebody came here legally. Nobody knows that number. There's never been a study.
Yes, I can give you that number. I've done that study.
Okay.
And it's about 50% higher if you're legally holding education constant, okay? Because the illegals do not get means-tested welfare to the same degree.
Sure.
The group.
Have you ever done it? Have you ever seen anything on this? Has anybody ever done a study on, like, take the 2.1 million people, okay?
I think the witnesses are better positioned to answer the question.
Yes,
Yeah.
Senator, I have done
But
that
have you ever?
study.
You have? Okay, okay. I'd like to see it, because
Absolutely.
here's why I look at it. Here's the way I look at it. It's not fair to the person that comes here legally, right? It's completely unfair to somebody who busts their butt, comes to the legal process, because first of all, it's not free. It costs some money. I mean, my office does a lot of this in Florida, as you would expect. And we help a lot of people go through the process that have a right to be here. They have a right to be here, but they don't know how the process works. And then the lawyers, it's shocking how much these people are paying. So that's one thing. But I'd like to see a study of that. But first off, I think it's completely unfair if somebody comes through the process, then somebody comes here legally. Second, it would be nice to know what the cost of the shelter and all this stuff is, because that does cost us, and all of us are going to pay this in taxes. And then the other question I have is, it has to impact, and I don't know where the number, where you limit it, but it has to impact jobs. I mean, if there's way more people in the job market.
There's a very extensive literature on the impact of low-skill immigration on low-skill American workers, particularly low-skill black male workers, okay? And I know of I think it's 83 studies of that I have read and studied.
Do the rest of you agree with that? Do you guys agree with that? You don't think that?
But the bottom line is 9 out of 10 of those studies show that there's a significant wage loss effect when you bring in low-skill immigrant workers to compete with those low-skill American workers. It's just, the literature is overwhelming. It's just overwhelming, and it's common sense. It's what economics tells us.
We are beyond the senator's time, but I did see Mr. Beer reaching for his microphone, and he was spoken over by Mr. Rector, so let me give him a chance to add his response to the general question asked by Senator Scott.
If you look at when we saw the greatest wage growth in the United States for the non-college educated population, it was from the 1950s through the 1970s, when the labor force growth for that population was 3 times what it is now, and since the 1980s. So the idea that we're seeing more labor force growth, more labor force competition for this population is totally untrue. In fact, that population is in decline, and we need workers to fill these types of jobs. We talked about manufacturing, talked about meat processing, talked about farm workers. There are jobs, and in fact, there are far more job openings than there are unemployed people in the United States right now. If you want a job, I can find you a job, no problem.
Yeah, it would, well, logically you would say that if there's more workers, it's going to impact my ability to get a job. Just a kid growing up in a poor family in a poor neighborhood, that's what you would say, right? I think that's logical. Now, there might be other factors that are going to grow your economy faster. But I think the other thing we're dealing with is the fact that we have now a labor participation rate, and we've got 100 million people in our country that are of working age that are now not working. And we got to, all these things, it's not like just one thing we're going to fix. We got to fix immigration, and we got to get people back to work. And it's because it's not going to work if we don't. So.
Again, I saw Mr. Beer trying to respond, if you don't mind letting him.
Yeah, just the logical point, yes, when more people come in, they increase the supply of labor, but they also increase the demand for labor. So if I can hire a worker on my farm, I'm buying equipment that worker is going to use, and that's increasing demand for workers in manufacturing. I could give you countless examples. In the H-2B visa lottery, when the losers who don't get the visas don't create more jobs for Americans, the ones who win the lottery create more jobs for Americans.
So I'm pro-immigration. I'm for
Oh,
immigrant. Okay.
I know, I'm
Okay,
just,
I'm pro-immigrant.
Yeah.
I just think we've got to figure out, I think we have to do two things. We have to get Americans back to work, and two, we have to figure out how we incentivize, create a system where we get people to want to come here to work and not be dependent. Because, I mean, I think we have to do both of those things. And then there has to be limits. I mean, you can't say 100 million people. If all of Guatemala comes tomorrow, they might be wonderful people, but we couldn't afford that.
If I could give another historical example.
Thank you. Let me wrap up at this point. We're 5.5 minutes over the senator's time.